Okay, we're going.
All right. Okay, just want to take a quick minute and introduce myself for any of you guys that are will be joining later, watching this video remotely. So my name's Jolynn Torgerson. I work for Southeast Education Service Center. My office is based in Price, and just kind of a quick blurb about what we do. We kind of do a little bit of everything. But one of the ways, so if you have technology questions or thinking about how to integrate technology in your classroom, we can serve as a resource. We try to work with the districts, particularly providing assessment support, really kind of a little bit of everything. So if you have questions about what we can do or how we can help, please feel free to email me. My email will be on the presentation. And if I can't help you, I'll try to direct you to a place of somebody that can. So I know this is kind of driven towards junior high teachers today, and so I'll approach it a little bit differently. I'll approach it with the assumption that most of the students have seen RISE before, which is helpful, right? We know we're going to have some new students that are going to move in, but I'm not going to approach it in a way that is maybe an elementary student who they've never seen the platform before. So we'll gear it towards that a little bit. One thing I wanted to point out that RISE actually stands for is Readiness, Improvement, Success, and Empowerment, which is ironically, I think what most students don't feel when you bring up the word assessment. And so part of my thought process in this is I actually think it's super important that you share that with the students. Like, what does RISE mean? And then try to really put a positive focus on, nobody really loves testing, right? But can we find some positive things about it? And can we teach students that this is a really great way to find growth and to take some anxiety out of getting ready for assessments because you feel like you're prepared. And so, especially with these benchmarks, I think if you focus on helping your students realize that you're not trying to test them to death, what you're trying to do is provide a space where you can say, hey, let's see where you're at. And we're going to show so much growth this year. But the only way we can measure growth is we have to have some baselines and we have to have some markers to show that growth. So let's do this. And really try to bring an energy into your classroom and into the assessment process that supports that. Because I believe the tone that you take with your students, that's exactly what they'll go into a test with. And anxiousness is already somewhat high anyways for most people when you say assessment. So keep that in mind and say, hey, we're going to help you be ready. We're going to empower you. We want you to be successful and we want you to show improvement. So most people don't even know what RISE stands for. So maybe you think about focusing on that as a teacher in the classroom. So a couple things about the benchmark assessments. They are fixed form assessments. Typically, there's anywhere from 8 to 22 questions on them, and I will show you where you can go to find out how many questions are on each assessment so that you have an idea. They cover all the content areas, and then they're kind of, the way that they're grouped is kind of with overarching standards. So the idea behind it is to give teachers and students kind of an opportunity to identify what are the strengths within specific knowledge sets and skills. Share that as a why with students. If they're like, why are we doing this? Share that as a why. This is our why, right? We want to kind of identify what your strengths are. We're not trying to identify, yes, we're identifying weaknesses, right? But we also want to go, what are your strengths? So make sure you include that with the students. Everybody, there's always more buy-in when you can give a why to what you're doing, not just, well, because Jeff and Janet told me I have to do it, right? Like, give them the why that is, hey, I want to know this. You know why? It makes me a better teacher, right? Like, I want to direct my teaching to what you need. And I want to help your strengths grow, and I want to help you improve in ways. So think about that as well. Another thing is that students can take these benchmark assessments throughout the year. They can take them more than once, right? So there's not a cap on, hey, you see it once and that's all, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can utilize these. You can utilize these even as a, hey, I want to see what a baseline is going into this math concept. I'm going to give them a little benchmark assessment. And then can you give them the same one at the end? Yes, you can. Right? So there's a lot of ways you can do it, but think about that because it's not capped on how often you can use it. A couple things I wanted to show you before kind of moving into the presentation part was a couple of strategies that I learned. I was a classroom teacher for 13 years before this job, and so I have hopefully that lends me a little bit of credibility when I talk about a little bit of this. And I've really messed up a lot of things. And doing that helped me learn things that worked for me. And so, again, this is not an idea that I suggest is always going to work for everybody, but hopefully we'll maybe just give you an idea of something you can work or do. When you give these assessments, look, the benchmarks, it sounds like, are optional. You're going to try to start to work some of those things in, but you're all going to be giving the RISE assessment, summative assessment at the end of the year. So with that in mind, one thing you could potentially think about doing is all the students, you need a test ticket in order for them to take these assessments. It's got their name, it's got some identifying information, name, SSID number, grade, what school they go to, their birthday. You don't need to keep printing out these test tickets every time, in my opinion. I'll show you today where you go and how you do that. But what I found worked for me was I would print these test tickets one time at the beginning of the year. I printed off, essentially for me, I printed it off in a sheet. I'm missing 2 of them because I cut them, but this was, you could do 10 to a sheet, okay? And then what I would do is I would just cut the sheet up. I would put the names out on the table and manila folder. I would ask the students to find their card, grab a manila folder and a piece of tape. And all I wanted them to do was to tape that on there. And this was now their folder for the year. They used this every time we did a benchmark. Anything that we did, this was their folder. It's not theirs to keep in their desk though. We always consider this secure because it has personally identifying information on it. On this one, I blocked out, of course, the student's name, the SSID number, but this way we didn't have to keep printing test tickets and passing them out every time. This was their testing folder. And then I would always just leave a sheet of blank paper, and their job was every time we had something they knew to just grab a blank sheet of paper, grab their folder, they were sitting on the table and they would take it and they were ready to go. It created routine for the students. It made my job a lot easier. I wasn't duplicating something again and again and again. All I had to do was keep track of the folder. I was an elementary teacher, so I always hear from, junior high teachers, I have 130 kids, or, you have kids rotating in. I understand that this may not work for you, or it may, if you go, also all you're doing though is you're doing 130 times that. You still just, if you do it once, you're still done, right? You have your first period, your second period. So you may have to tweak what you're doing. I still believe it would save you time. I'll talk about another thing I use this folder with in just a minute. And again, remember that once students use these, they test for any reason. Benchmark, summative, you always collect them. You take the paper, you collect it, and you store it in a secure place. Very important for test fidelity and also keeping personal information private. So an idea I wanted to show before I went into present mode. And then let's see. The other thing too is just as a thought, any paper they use on these tests, you also have to keep secure. So don't just take the paper out or say, oh, take your paper out and stick it in your desk or throw it away if it was scratch paper. It always comes back in the folder. You remove anything and you properly discard of that paper. If you're pausing a test and they're going to come back to it, that's fine. They can come back to it and jump onto it. So there's an idea for you that hopefully will make your life a little bit more efficient as you're moving through the year. All right, I'm going to present a couple things. I want to show you around the site, and then I want to share some slides with you, but I want to take you to the site first. All right, are you guys seeing the RISE portal, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so to get here, you go to utahrise.org. This is the main screen. You're not logged on to anything yet, but I wanted to do a quick walkthrough before we jumped into the kind of the module previewing and then showing you how to assign a test. In my opinion, a first place to always start before benchmarks, before anything else, is always the training tests, and that's right here. There's 2 reasons I would suggest that. Get students used to the platform first, right? There's question types. There is the login process. And all of this can be, is essentially replicated in the training tests. And it just takes the air out of the balloon, right? It's low cost. I would always do these with my students as a group and say, hey, I'm going to just present it on your screen and say, hey, we're going to look at this together today. We're going to, or you can put them in partners and have them say, try the buttons, click it. If they say, what does this do? Say, I don't know, try it, right? It's no cost for them to just click around and be familiar. And so anytime you go into training tests, you have 2 options. One is students entering as a guest. And then you also have where you can actually kind of proctor a more live situation. For a first run, I would just suggest going right into training tests. Just leave this on. It's already toggled on as that you're going to be a guest, and you can click sign on. Have them choose their grade level. So we'll choose 7th for today and just say, hey, we're going to try We're going to look at math today. Math and science have I think the steepest learning curve with what the questions look like. So make sure they have exposure to all of those. I would say before any test you do, I believe it elevates their success on the actual test. So they're always going to get these settings. This kind of comes down to teacher preference about whether or not you want to allow students to choose any of the visual assistance tools. For example, they can change the background. If a light blue background is better for them to read, that's a tool that's open to everyone. You can, I would say, refer to your site coordinators or Shannon or Jeff, and they can give you specific direction about whether or not there's an allowance there that is not afforded in an IEP or a 504, but it's an option. Typically, I just had students move through this unless I knew there was a student that needed a colored background reader, and then I would just kind of on the side tell that student to please check that. If not, kids think that it's really fun to choose red on black or whatever because it's fun, but that's not the point. So we want to just be thoughtful about how you go about that. Okay, this is where I always gave students choice because I let them do it once and they mess with it with their headphones in and then they're over it. They have a voice pack options. So there's David, Mark, or Zira. I let my students choose. I don't care if they listen to a male or a female voice, but if it makes them feel like they have choice, maybe let them hear all the voices and go, that one sounds the best to me. And then I would also, so let's say that they chose Mark, and they listen to all the voices. I just always told them to leave the volume and the pitch alone, but I gave some parameters with rate. For some students, the rate is so slow. So the rate would be anything that they have that text-to-speech option, which is available to all students as an accommodation, unless it's not going to read comprehension passages, right? But on anything else, they can use text-to-speech if they choose. The rate can be pretty slow for some students, right? So I would let them mess with it within parameters. So let's say they decide they wanted to have a rate of 12. They listen to it and they're like, that's just right. That is a nice flow for what my brain is ready for. And they play it, they hear the voice, and they decide that's exactly what I want. I have all students pause right here, and I make a mark it on their folder. What voice did you choose and what rate did you choose? That's what it's going to be. I did that for two reasons. One, so the students didn't think they had to mess with it every time. I gave them the chance to get it out of their system and choose. And then also it let me have eyes on when they turn their folder in the first time. If some student chose 20 for a rate, I could have a private conversation with them and be like, hey, so that actually doesn't work. Why don't you stay in for a recess? Let's get that right. Okay. Again, that's something that as a district, there might be parameters where they say, no, we don't want them to choose. But it is an option. I always found that when students felt like they had a little bit of choice in something, they had more buy-in. But again, refer to your district coordinators for that. Okay, so once they hear that, oops. This text is being read aloud. So I don't know if you could hear that, but that was the voice. You could get a little bit of idea of the rate, and then you continue. And then it will move into the questions. So this is where I would open it up again. This is looking just like a regular assessment would, whether it's a benchmark or an end of year. Encourage the students to try all the tools and the buttons at the top. Say, play with it, see what it does. Find out what happens. When you highlight something and you click your menu up here, what options do you have? This is a time for them to learn how to use the system. We're not, how do you delete a point? How do you make a point? And talk through all those things as a class. So please, I strongly encourage you to use training tests first, okay? Also, things will always auto-save every question, but there's also a save up here. Students don't ever know what that is because it looks like one of those old discs and they have no idea. It's like foreign to them. I don't know why they still use that as a save icon because nobody saves on those, but that's what it is. Okay, so I'm going to kind of move back out of training tests. So I would suggest training tests first, okay? Just a little familiarity with the platform. Resources are available to anybody. We'll talk about that more on the slides, but anything and everything, there's a resource for here. And typically, for whatever reason, I swear they're all about 100 pages is what it feels like. So we've tried to do the best we can to kind of narrow it down and give you the most important information, but you always have access to those things. And if you do the search function on your computer, once you have that PDF open and search for a keyword, it'll at least narrow it down to a few key pages for you, which is helpful too. So I'm going to come back here to home. Anytime you want to actually get in the system, if you notice above here where it says resource, all the other ones say system above them, whether it's benchmark, tide, testament, they all say system. As soon as you hit any one of those, it's going to ask you to log in. Okay, I already logged in, so it's not, it's not showing that. I'll go ahead and log out so you can see what it looks like. But as soon as you hit anything that says system, this is your login page. If this is your first time logging in this year, you have to do this. You have to request a new one every year. So you'll hit request, you'll get a link in your email, make yourself a new password, then you can log in. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Okay. So I'm going to come back here real quick. So training test first. Before you decide what benchmark module you want to, it's like, how do you decide what you want to, what do you want to assign to the students? I would suggest going to resources first, and you'll notice the very top one is a directory. This is going to give you all of the modules that you have available to you. Okay, so you click there. There's just one page of these. You'll notice some of them, they've got all the Braille ones listed here too. If you want everything in one shot, I would just go to this main one that says benchmark module delivery, or you can see that it's broken down by subject. What I like to do is go to the general module directory, and I would download one of them. And then this is where you get the breakdown of what's the test name, what is it going to measure. You can see that for this, there's 4 available tests, okay? And you can see how many questions are on each one. So the first one in 3rd grade for informational, it has 13 questions, one has 9, one has 11, another has 11. This form, it's not too long. If you plan on using the benchmarks fairly regularly, I would suggest even making a copy of this and then making a note on there when you do what date did you do which one, or putting a check mark by it or something, because it's easy to forget, right? There's so many things going on. So that's an option for you. But you basically, this is your breakdown of every single module that's available for every grade. So if you're obviously for junior high, you're going to scroll down here a bit. Let's see, you've got like your 7th grade literature standard. And so it's going to tell you exactly what standards it covers over here. So as you're doing your curriculum planning and you're like, I want something that's going to kind of help assess this standard, find it over here on the right, and then go, hey, I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to give test number 1. It's got 9 questions. We can do that today, right? If you see anything that has the 2 asterisks, all that is saying is it's a test that is available to be given remotely. Which I don't believe. I believe everybody is in session this year. It shouldn't be an option. But if you do see, so you'll notice if you do need to give a remote benchmark assessment as an instructor, you're much more limited on what is actually available. Okay. All right. So once you, oops. Oh. All right, so once you know which module you want to give and you've logged in, you would select what grade, okay? And here are where the modules are, okay? This isn't where you assign it to the students. This is where you're like, okay, I think I know which one I want to give. It's 9 questions, it's ELA, it's whatever standard, and you would find it here, okay? It's pretty long. Make sure that you are not doing it. We'll switch down here into the Braille ones are usually blue. But this is a chance for you as a teacher to get eyes on the questions, right? That way you're not just assigning something without knowing exactly what questions are on it. So you first zero down to what standard do I want to assess by looking at that directory. And then you'll come here. Let's say that we picked a math one that we want to do. It's test number 1. And so we go ahead and choose it. At this point, it's kind of like you're taking it as a student. It just gives you a chance to have eyes on those questions. So you aren't walking into it blind as an instructor. Again, you'll notice it looks just like the training test. So you'll go ahead and you will move through these questions. It doesn't score it or any, but it allows you to see, hey, this is exactly what I want my students to have, or this isn't quite it. Okay. So this is just basically a preview system. So you can see what is on that assessment. All right. Yeah. Log back in over here. All right. I'm going to move over to kind of the presentation part here. Just wanted to see the platform, so you have a little bit of an idea as we're moving through this, and then we can kind of jump back over if we need to. Kind of already did an introduction. There will be, Shannon and Jeff both have a link to this presentation. You'll also notice this is kind of what I talked about, that you need to make sure you reset your login. Just a reminder to do that. But here is a way to access this presentation right here within it. So if you're watching this, it's recorded and you're watching it, you can just go ahead and scan that QR code with your phone, or you can click on the link and you now have access to all of these slides as well. So in addition to having the recording, you've got the slides as a resource as well. So any devices that the students take this benchmark on, they have to have that Air Secure browser installed. Hopefully the Chromebooks are ready to go. It's also another reason to do a training test that is not guessed, or a benchmark test, because you're going to find the bugs early. Like, I don't want to find a bug when I'm ready to give my students a summative test. I want to find an issue well before then, right? So that you can problem solve that as a teacher, as long as with your staff personnel or your district personnel that may need to know. We talked about student test tickets already and how it shows their name and their SSID number. If a student already knows those things, they don't necessarily need a ticket. However, I've had a student before that was sure they knew it. They typed in the SSID number, they thought it was them, and they started to click through really quick. There's always a thing that comes up that pauses students and says, is this you? It has their name, their school, everything, right? And thankfully, I caught them just before they clicked yes, because they just wanted to click yes, yes, yes. It wasn't them. They were one digit off, and they were a student somewhere else. So, I suggest just, using that folder and having that test ticket printed out. But if a student knows it, that's all that they really need. You might get prompted by the system to let you allow pop-ups. You do need to allow them. So click allow, yes, and then go ahead and hit that refresh, and you shouldn't have anything blocked after that. But if you get that pop-up, do allow pop-ups to come up. It's suggested that when you do these benchmarks, you do them in a single session. And again, the process, this should help ease you as teachers and your students. The process for this is exactly the same as the summative, right? So again, small ways to take away that anxiety for testing and be like, hey, we're just checking your success. And at the end of the year, we get a big success check, and it feels really good, and I'm going to have you so ready for it. So again, really positive connotations that are around doing this. Bring that energy that changes their idea about the ways and why they're assessed. And again, these results can give an indication somewhat on how they'll perform, but they are not predictive of RISE summative test performance because they have so few items, right? On RISE, there's about 50-ish questions versus 9, right? Like 9 questions don't predict how they're going to do on summative. So keep that in mind either way, and remind your students of that too. If they bomb one, cool, we got a lot of time to get you ready. Don't worry about it, right? So give them some perspective. All right, so these are your directions for how do I assign that benchmark module. Quick start steps and kind of get you going, which I'll go over. But if you forget, there is 100 and I think like 70, maybe I think it's over 200 pages this year, a 200-page TAM. It's always available to you. You can also feel free to reach out to me if you have just forgotten please don't feel like there's going to be any judgment on my end or anyone else where you're like, I've forgotten how to do this. I've been there too. Like sometimes out of sight, out of mind, you're teaching all day long and then here it comes, shoot me an email. We can get you going pretty quick. Okay. We kind of showed you the screen already, but you go to utahrise.org. That resources tab on the top honestly does have anything and everything. Use a keyword search there first, and that should help you with instructions. Jeff or Shannon, are any of your devices set up for two-factor authentication?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. If for some reason you get that code, your email address, you should get a 6-digit code just in case districts are different. But just know that, don't panic. It's just a security thing and you can move through that. It sounds like you guys won't run into that down there. You're probably just good to log in.
Yeah, I've never seen that on any of our devices.
Okay, perfect. Makes it easier. Okay, so printing those test tickets like I showed you on that. How do I get to that actual test ticket? How do I get that, right? There's a couple different ways that you can do it. So when you log on that main menu, I'm going to go back one. If you look right here where it says Tide, System Tide, the third one down, you're going to get this screen, okay? And one of your options right over there on administering tests is print test ticket. So you choose that and you choose print from the roster list. Once you get there, you're going to choose your school. Obviously, you guys aren't going to choose Grand District. I put that in there because that's who I have an account with right now. But you would obviously choose San Juan, and then you would choose your teacher name. After you've done that, you'll see where your class is going to come up. You want to check that blue box right there by your class number. And once you've indicated this is the class I want you to get me a roster for, right? You'll come up to that print icon, go ahead and select that, and then you'll see your option is to print test tickets. Once you hit that, you have options, right? Like it'll print, it defaults to that 10 tickets per page, like I showed you. So they're, about 1.5 inches by 3 inches, but you can change that if you'd like. So you have options there, but it will print those test tickets for you. All right. You can also choose, don't worry too on this screen, the SSID, you can see it will not appear until you actually hit print. So don't panic. Once you hit print and it prints those off, you will see that the SSID number is on there. So just kind of a step to not panic. It is there. You just won't see it until you actually are printing those. Okay. We already kind of reviewed where this is too. Remember, so you can go into, this is that directory that we talked about where you can see all of the modules that are available for you. Specifically, remember we talked about that 200-page TAM. If you look on pages 41 to 50, that is your specific instructions for the benchmark module. So try to at least narrow it down for you to go right to the spot to look about how to access those resources and what they talk about. But that is the module directory. So then once you've chosen, you've looked at the module directory, you've decided, okay, let me see what questions are on there. That's when you go to the benchmark module previewing. So that's the second one down right below your resources. And that lets you see what items are on there. And then again, that tip, you have to move through it like a student. You can't just blast through, pick an answer and move through. You respond just like a student does, but you can at least see what questions are coming their way if you choose to assign that module. All right, so now you're ready. You've decided. Yep, the students have done a practice test. They're feeling good. You're feeling good. You've gone to the directory. You've decided what test you think you want to give them. You've gone to the previewing and you've kind of taken it as a student. So you can look at each of the questions and you're like, yeah, let's do this. This is the one I want to assign. You're now going to go into the fourth option down, which is test administration. And that is where, this is also the same place you'll go when you do your summative, okay? So anytime you're actually going to administer a test, this is where you're going to go, okay? If you haven't already, it's going to ask you again for your login. And then you will see, make sure that you're in the yellow, shows active session. You see those two tabs at the top. One is active sessions, one is upcoming sessions. You can pre-schedule sessions. That's probably a whole other training module. You can assign these pretty quickly. as long as you have a list of what you want to do, you've already gone through the previewing process, it's pretty fast to just assign them and get them going. If you have questions about, you're like, I want to assign mine, I want to have them ready, reach out to me. I can kind of walk you through that process. Okay, but we're going to stick to just active sessions today. So once you're in that yellow active session, you'll just go ahead and click start a new session. And then you'll see where you need to drill down just a little bit. Okay, so don't just choose, I'm going to pick everything we want to do over the next 2 weeks. It's too much, right? Because whatever you select, students are going to see all those options. And then you're going to have Johnny that doesn't listen and he picks one and 4 of the students get it right. You're going to kind of create your own disaster a little bit. Keep it really simple for the students. So decide exactly which one you want to do. So you notice on this one, they are in benchmark models. They chose reading. So you see anytime you can click on it and it will drill down even further. They chose 4th grade, and then they chose the exact module that they wanted, which was editing test B. They only selected that one. And then you'll see down at the very bottom, it says start the live test session. Okay. So it's going to ask you for a reason. And, Shannon and Jeff, if you have any feedback on this about how you would like teachers to specifically approach this, I don't know if again, it probably depends on the way that you want them to utilize them. If teachers are going to use it as a pre-assessment before they teach, a content area, and then as a post-test, if you're comfortable with them assigning them as that task, the test reason, that's fine. Or if you want them all to say fall. Do you have any input on if there's something specific you'd like teachers to put there?
I think it depends on how we ultimately decide to use them.
Okay.
So for now, I would say, however they want to label it, because it's going to be for them.
Perfect.
Okay. If we decide to use these as, fall, winter, spring benchmarks, then we definitely want to label them that way.
Perfect. Yeah. And it's not, there's a lot of options. So at this point, it sounds like you can kind of do what makes sense to you and the way that you want to organize your process about assigning these. So, okay. So it'll always ask you. Now, that's what you do on your end. It's pretty quick and pretty straightforward. The back end piece is more deciding which one you want to assign, right? The thoughtfulness of that. Once you know, the actual assigning is really quick. So that's your piece. What do students see, right? So they're going to open that secure browser on their device. Remember, when students are opening that secure browser, they're not logging on to the Chromebook first. It's an app that's down on the bottom of the Chromebook. They choose it and it says Air Secure Browser. They click that and they're on, right? So they do not log on to their Google account. It's just an app that's on those Chromebooks, okay? And again, these junior high kids have probably done this a lot, so they're going to know. But maybe you're a new teacher, or maybe you have a new student. And so that's information for you to have as well. So once they, again, if you've got your folder, either you've given them a test ticket or they've got their folder, they're ready to go. It's going to ask them for their first and last name. It's going to ask them for their SSID number. Those tickets have that. And so they will put that in. And then every test has a unique code, right? So obviously, student name, SSID number always gets them in, but that specific test, and it will always start with test, and then it will have a unique code that you will see. I would always just write that up on the board, and then they would put that in there to get them into that specific test. Okay. Remember, don't ever write SSID numbers up on the board. Don't shout out an if Johnny says he can't log in or he forgot his SSID number and he's lost his folder or whatever, please make sure that those, again, anything that's personally identifiable, you want to keep between yourself and that student and keep it secure. So this is the number that you would give them. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like. It starts with live dash. It's going to be a 4-digit code, a dash, and then another code. That's specific to that session. Once they put that code in, remind students that they're going to have something that says you're waiting for teacher approval. So as a teacher, you're sitting and just say, hey, that's cool, no problem, right? Like you might have to wait just a minute. And then on your screen as a teacher, you will see that a group is waiting for approval. If you are comfortable looking and saying, yep, there's 10 students, I know they're all sitting here in front of me, you can just batch approve them all. Yes, approve all the students. And as soon as they're approved, then they can start taking that test. Okay. All right. Testing rules and procedures. So on page 59 are where the instructions are for the scripted instructions for these benchmark modules. And I can see Jeff kind of laughing, and I laugh about this too, because I did not care for this as a teacher, and I think most teachers don't, because the beauty of a classroom, right, is the kind of organic conversations that you have with your kids all the time. And that's the energy I feel in the room. With that said, it matters what you say to them, and it matters that you follow these scripted instructions. And I've always found, if students have the why behind this, they're okay with it. So you can't just do this and then all of a sudden pull out your paper with your script and start reading, and they look at you like, who are you? Right? All of a sudden you become this alien. They're like, what class am I? Why are you doing that? They're just, and I'm sure junior high kids have more to say than that, right? I can imagine. So before you even jump into a benchmark, I would suggest you say to them, hey, look, here's how this goes. We get to check your success. Once we kind of get started and we're ready to get going, I have to read to you from a script. It's scripted instructions. Here's why I do this, right? Every student in the state of Utah has access and teachers to these same things, right? And it matters to me. Like, I want you guys to be successful. And it matters to me and to everyone across the state that whenever any of you guys take these tests, you all have the same playing field, right? Like, nobody wants to play a game of basketball where one team only has to shoot from 5 feet away every time, and the rest of the field has to shoot from half court. It's not fair, right? And kids are like, yeah, that's not fair. And be like, well, one way we help to just kind of make sure the playing field is as fair as it is that as teachers, we all read these scripted instructions. And so it's going to feel a little bit different to you for the first time, but that's why I do it, right? And unfortunately, I can help you in practice tests and I can help, but I have to, it's a little different and it's hard on me as a teacher too, right? So just give them the why and just say, and I say, I'll always tell you as soon as I'm ready to go. I always call that Mr. Roboto mode. And I say, as soon as you hear me say that, I'm going into scripted instructions, and that's why. And it was always fine with students after that. It didn't feel weird to them. And so, but if you just spring it on them, it does feel weird. So, please look at the instructions that are on page 59 and just follow them. It will walk you right through it, right? Today, I'm going to give you a benchmark assessment on math and whatever it is. And it is part of your ethics training that you commit to doing this. And so, Jeff and Shannon can clarify if there's something different, but ethically reading these instructions are part of the test experience, whether it's a benchmark module or a summative test. And so just make it happen and make it positive and go with it. All right. We just talked about this where they're waiting for approval again. Security step, make sure that Johnny Jingles is really Johnny Jingles. There have been mistakes that have happened. So just double check your screen. And if you notice a student name that for some reason, maybe they are 1 digit off when they put that SSID number. And then when it says, is this really you? And they didn't pay attention and they move forward, it's not really them. Don't approve that test. Okay. Have them log back out, try again. All right. So when students get done, they click finish. Make sure you teach them general good testing processes, which is reviewing questions, using their scratch paper. They can use as much scratch paper, blank paper as they want. It's open and free for them to use. They're not limited on that. Make sure that they take the time they need, and then they'll just click stop, and that will end the test for students. If you need to stop everybody, you can stop it on your end as well. Okay. Results. Students aren't going to see a result on their screen. You can access those on your reporting screen about 24 hours after. Please be thoughtful with this about sharing individual results with individual students. And if you have other teachers that are assigned to that student, maybe there is a special ed teacher that works with them and wants to be able to see those results or whatever. If you have, or your co-teaching classes, any teacher that has that student assigned underneath them can also see those results on their reporting dashboard as well. So things that can kind of help prepare you and students for ICE, just kind of some thoughts. Make sure, again, small group instruction, differentiated instruction, using Utah Compose, which we'll talk more about when we do the writing benchmark in a couple, I think that's in like a month or so coming up. Yeah. So we can talk more about that when we do the writing benchmarks, utilizing any of those practice tests, any time that you can do e-assessments of any sort. It just gets them used to that format, right? And I truly believe the more comfortable they are, success goes up. Okay, a lot to kind of cover really fast. Hopefully having access to the slides will help you. I've got my contact information here. Shannon is your assessment director, along with many other hats. And Jeff is a curriculum director, I'm sure, along with many other hats as well. And so both of them will be a great resource for you. You can see there's a link. Shannon put a link to the presentation. We talked a little bit before about if you're reading through something and it doesn't make sense, or you're wondering the why, or you're trying but you're kind of buggered up on something, feel free to reach out to me, right? If you don't have a login, that's something that Shannon will have to help you with. I don't have any back-end access, or you are missing a student on your RISE roster. If you have a new student, keep this in mind. If you have a new student that just checked in, give it 24 to 48 hours for that student to show up, because this data is linked through Utrex. It talks every 24 hours and it uploads new students onto all the different platforms, including RISE. Okay, so be a little bit patient. So, if it's been 3 hours and the student checked in that morning and for some reason you want to get them on RISE with the rest of the class, Shannon can't help you with that. You just got to give it 24 hours and see if it's 24 to 48 and that student is still not showing up on your roster, that's a good time to email your site coordinator or Shannon about that. Those things I can't help you with. Using the platform, or I've even helped, I've done some remote things with classes before where I've run training tests with the students and talked about the tools together with the students. And sometimes it just gives somebody else to talk about it instead of you as the teacher. And sometimes that's just a change up for the students. So any way that I can support you as teachers in trying to help make assessment, which never sounds great, but we're trying to think about positive energy and what we bring and how we model that for our students matters. Any way I can help support you in that, I'd love to. So please feel free to email me, reach out to me. I know that Shannon and Jeff also both have an email that is a direct link where you can access my calendar and you can sign up at your convenience. It's your prep hour the next day. And that's the best time for you to have a phone call with me for 15 minutes. You can access my calendar and schedule right there, or we can hop on a meet and you can share your screen and say, I'm stuck right here. Can you help me? So anyway, that's kind of all that I have. Shannon or Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to say thank you so much, Jolynn, for helping us out with this. You are a very valuable resource for us. So thank you so much for your time.
Definitely, no problem. Look forward to working with you guys through the year. It's the start. It's very busy right now. Find ways to make this be a part of informing your instruction. If anything, this is valuable because if it can inform instruction, it's helpful as a teacher. If it's a test, it's just a test, it's a hoop, and it feels like that isn't valuable, but this can truly inform your instruction. And that's where I see the value in it. So please utilize it as a tool that will inform your instruction, and that makes it valuable to everybody, including you and your students. So reach out with questions to any of us, and look forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Jolynn.
Thanks, Jolynn.
Thanks, everyone.